You could always tell who'd been on base long enough. They walked differently, they spoke differently, and they understood one rule better than any regulation in a 1,000-page manual. Respect isn't given here, it's earned, and sometimes earned the hard way. Fort Ranger, tucked deep into the pine-shadowed mountains of Colorado, wasn't a base many people talked about. On record, it served as an advanced joint training facility for special operations personnel. Unofficially, it was where the military sent candidates they couldn't categorize, individuals who didn't fit perfectly into an existing mold, people with potential beyond the usual metrics, people who needed to be tested in unconventional ways. Tonight, the air was cold enough to sting the skin, but warm enough that the recruits in the courtyard were sweating through their shirts. Floodlights sliced pale lines across the pavement, illuminating a world of grit, discipline, and buried tempers. A small crowd had gathered, too many for something trivial, too still for something innocent, and at the center of that circle lay a woman, unconscious, unmoving, her cheek pressed against the concrete. No one knew her name yet, but soon, everyone would. She arrived at Fort Ranger 3 days earlier. Call sign: Holloway. Real name: Lieutenant Mara Holloway, U.S. Navy, 29 years old. Prior experience classified. Her file was slim, but not for lack of substance, because half of it was redacted under black bars. All the other recruits saw was a quiet woman with lean muscle, calm posture, and a silence that felt more deliberate than shy. She answered questions politely, kept her bunk tidy, and wrote in a notebook every night before lights out. The kind of person who looked ordinary, until she didn't. But soldiers judge quickly, and recruits judge even faster. To them, she was the new girl, the outsider, the one who didn't talk, the one they assumed was weak. Especially the trio of trouble you always find in places like this, men who'd been here just long enough to think they owned the yard. Everyone called them the line breakers, Sykes. Big, loud, carried his ego like an extra rucksack. Wilmot, sneaky grin, cruel humor, loved conflict a little too much. Ramos, quiet but dangerous, because he followed the other two. They had one rule: mess with whoever looks like the easiest target, and Mara Holloway looked to them like the easiest of all. It started at chow, as these things do. "Hey, new girl," Sykes said loudly, blocking her path with his tray. "You Navy or kindergarten? 'Cause I swear, I've seen toddlers hold themselves straighter." Mara glanced up. Just once. Calm. Unbothered. "Excuse me," she said. Polite. The crowd froze. Polite was gasoline here. Wilmot smirked. "You hear that?" She said, "Excuse me. I think she's lost." Ramos stepped in. "Maybe she needs help finding the little ladies section." Laughter rose around them. Mara stepped aside and walked around them without another word. That silence, that simple refusal to play along, humiliated them far more than any comeback could have. They decided she needed to be put in place, and they chose tonight. Fort Ranger had an unofficial tradition, unsanctioned, unspoken, but very real, a fight circle. If you had a problem with someone, you settled it after lights out behind the motor pool courtyard. No weapons, no rank, just fists. The line breakers had dragged at least 6 recruits into that circle in the last month alone. None fought back well enough to stop them. And tonight they chose Mara. They approached her bunk. "You." "Outside," Sykes ordered. She looked up from her notebook. "Is someone injured?" Wilmot snorted. "Yeah, you, soon." She sighed softly, closed the notebook, and placed it neatly under her pillow. "Let me get my boots," she said. A few recruits followed behind them, eager for entertainment. Others followed because they felt guilty, a few because they wanted the line breakers to finally get what was coming. But Mara Holloway walked with the stillness of someone who had already predicted the night from start to finish. When they formed the circle, Sykes stepped inside, cracking his knuckles. "New girl," he called. "Welcome to Ranger." She didn't raise her fists. She didn't square her shoulders. She simply exhaled, and that was the last thing she remembered. Ramos struck first, from behind, something no one had expected. Cheap shot. Coward's hit. Her vision flashed white, then black. Her knees buckled. She collapsed. A gasp swept the crowd. Someone shouted, "Hey, what the hell? That wasn't part of it!" Wilmot laughed. "Should have been quicker." Sykes stepped forward, shaking his head. "Pathetic." They turned away. The crowd's disgust hung in the air. But no one moved. No one, except the woman on the ground. There are kinds of consciousness that only certain warriors develop. Coming awake, mid-fight, processing faster than pain, seeing threats before the eyes fully open. And Mara Holloway, though no one here knew it yet, had spent years training in those exact instincts. She wasn't unconscious. Not fully. Her body had gone slack to protect itself. Her mind had retreated to survive the blow. But seconds later, her breathing changed. Her posture changed. Then her fingers moved, slowly at first, then decisively. She pushed herself to her elbows. Someone whispered, "Holy crap, she's getting up!" Sykes turned around. "Let her! I'll knock her down again." He stepped forward, sneering. "You got lucky I didn't hit you yet." Mara spit a thin line of blood onto the concrete. No fear, no anger, just cold clarity. "Your mistake," she murmured, "was assuming I stay down." And in the next second, everything changed. Some fights last minutes, some last hours. This one lasted 8 seconds. Wilmot rushed first, sloppy, confident. She sidestepped, hooked his arm, and let his momentum throw him into the pavement. His breath left his chest in a ragged cough. Ramos charged next. She pivoted, caught his collarbone with a fast palm strike, and swept his legs in one motion. He hit the ground hard, gasping. Sykes froze for a brief second, just long enough to show fear. Mara walked toward him, steady as a metronome. "Stay back," he warned. "I swear I'll—" He swung wide. She slipped under the punch, struck his ribs. Once, twice, 3 times, not to injure, to collapse. He dropped to his knees. Before he could react, she caught his chin with her hand, forcing his eyes to meet hers. "You want dominance?" she whispered. "No, no," he stammered. "You want fear?" He shook his head frantically. "Then understand this." She lowered him gently onto the ground. Respect can't be taken, only earned. Sykes didn't move. The circle was silent. A crisp, brutal silence, the kind only a true fighter could create. Then the floodlights suddenly shifted. A figure appeared near the edge of the courtyard. Captain Renford. Fort Ranger's commanding officer. A man carved from discipline and tempered by decades in special operations. If he had been watching the fight, which he clearly had, he showed no emotion except a long, cold disappointment. "Everyone," he barked, "form up." Instantly, bodies scrambled into loose formation. Renford's boots echoed across the concrete as he approached Mara. He wasn't looking at her, though. He was staring at the 3 unconscious men. When he finally turned to her, his voice dropped. "I assume you didn't start this." "No, sir. You finished it." "Yes, sir." He studied her face, the swelling on her cheek, the dried blood near her lip. "You didn't escalate force beyond necessity." "No, sir. And you didn't injure them severely." "No, sir." He nodded. Then his voice shifted, loud enough for every recruit to hear. "Lieutenant Holloway," he said, "I suppose now is as good a time as any." The recruits stiffened. She waited. "Welcome," Renford continued, "to Fort Ranger's Advanced Cross-Branch Integration Program." Murmurs spread through the group. He continued, "For those unaware, Lieutenant Holloway is not a standard transfer. She arrives from Naval Special Warfare Development Group." A few recruits blinked. Wilmot whispered, "Wait, that's—" Renford cut him off. DevGru, more commonly referred to as SEAL Team 6. Silence detonated like a bomb. Renford lowered his tone again. "And she is here," he said, "as your evaluator." Mouths dropped. Holloway stood perfectly still. "She will be running stress response assessments," Renford continued. "Behavioral diagnostics, team composure trials, and ethics under pressure observations. And, apparently—" He cast a look at the 3 groaning men. "She's already begun." A ripple of discomfort moved through the recruits. Justice, real justice, had arrived tonight, and no one had even seen it coming. Medical staff carried the line breakers away for evaluation. Nothing fatal, nothing permanent, only bruises, physical and ego. Renford dismissed the recruits, but many didn't leave. They approached her quietly, cautiously. A few offered a nod, some whispered, "Ma'am," with new respect. One young private stepped forward, trembling slightly. "I should have stepped in," he said. "I saw what they were going to do, and I froze." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're here to learn," she said softly. "Not to be perfect," he swallowed. But you could have been hurt worse. I was prepared for worse. He hesitated. Are you going to report us? All of us? She looked around at the circle, the footprints, the blood dropped near her boot, the guilt lingering in the air. No, she said. Not unless it happens again. A collective breath escaped the crowd. Why? Someone asked. Because your worst choices shouldn't define your best potential. The recruits let the words settle. No one knew it yet, but this single night would change the next year of their lives. The following weeks were unlike anything the recruits had experienced. Holloway didn't raise her voice. She didn't bark orders. She didn't punish. She trained. Hard. Precise. Every drill, every exercise, every scenario felt designed to reveal character rather than break bodies. She paid attention to the quiet ones, to the ones whose hands shook, to the ones who covered insecurity with bravado, to the ones who secretly believed they weren't good enough. She saw them all, and she taught them, not just skills, but self-control, discipline, honor, and in doing so, she earned what the line-breakers had never managed to take. Respect. Sykes, Wilmot, and Ramos returned after a week, humiliated, exposed, but changed. Renford gave them two options: wash out of the program, continue training under the authority of the woman they had attacked. All three chose to stay, but they avoided her, avoided conflict, avoided everything, until the day she approached them during a weapons cleaning rotation. We need to talk, she said. They froze. She motioned them toward the empty side of the armory. Ramos spoke first. Ma'am, we're sorry. Sykes stared at the floor. We were stupid. Wilmot added, we don't expect forgiveness. Mara nodded slowly. Good, she said. Then let's talk about something more important than forgiveness. They looked up. What's that? Sykes asked. Growth. She sat on a bench, facing them. What you did was wrong, cowardly, unfair, and you hurt more than my face. You damaged this unit's trust. She let the words land. But men aren't defined by what they did, only by what they do after. The three listened in stunned silence. You will earn this team's respect back, she said. One action at a time. Wilmot asked quietly, and yours? She shook her head. You don't need my respect, she said. You need your own. And somehow those words hit them harder than her strikes had. The exercise that changed everything came on a fog-heavy morning in late October. A simulated compound infiltration, multi-angle approach, stress score weighted heavily on decision-making under fire. The recruits stumbled, got confused, lost comms. Panic rose like smoke. Then an explosion, simulated but loud enough to rattle bones, shook the ground. 3 recruits were injured. Sykes was among them. The exercise called for immediate extraction under pressure. At first, chaos, shouting, miscommunication, failure. Then, Holloway's voice cut through the mess. Calm, steady. Team Bravo, on me. Team Charlie, flank left. Sykes, can you move? Barely, but he tried. He collapsed. Ramos turned to Wilmot. We need to carry him. Wilmot shook his head. He's too heavy. Holloway stepped behind him. Then both of you lift. They tried. Failed the first attempt. Succeeded the second. Step by step, breath by breath, they followed her voice through the smoke. And for the first time, they weren't scared. They were guided by someone they had once mocked, by someone they had once struck, by someone who had forgiven more than they deserved, by someone who had shown them who they could be. When the exercise ended, Renford approached her. You did well, he said. She watched her recruits, her team, catch their breath. No, sir, she replied. They did. At the end of training, Fort Ranger held a recognition ceremony, not for the best marks, not for highest scores, but for exceptional growth and integrity. Renford stepped up to the podium. Most of you came here to test your limits, he said, but some of you discovered something harder, the courage to change. He paused. Private Sykes, Private Wilmot, Private Ramos. The crowd murmured. The trio stiffened. Front and center. They stepped forward. Renford nodded toward Holloway. This award, he said, was recommended by Lieutenant Holloway herself. Gasps spread like wind. Sykes blinked. She recommended us? Ramos whispered. Why? Holloway stepped forward. Because strength isn't measured by how hard you hit, she said. It's measured by how hard you work to become better than you were. The crowd stood silent, absorbing the weight of the moment. Renford pinned the ribbons onto their uniforms. Then he turned to Holloway. "And for exemplary leadership," he said, "we present the Vanguard Conduct Medal." Applause thundered through the courtyard, but Holloway didn't smile. She simply bowed her head in quiet acknowledgement. A few days later, Holloway packed her duffel bag. Her assignment at Fort Ranger was temporary. She knew that from the start. As she zipped her bag, Sykes approached her. "Ma'am," he said, "I just wanted to say thank you for not giving up on us." She nodded. "You earned everything yourself." Wilmot stepped forward next. "Will we see you again?" She slung the duffel over her shoulder. "In your careers? Yes, in your lives, maybe, in your growth?" She smiled faintly. "Always." Ramos saluted. She returned it. Crisp. Perfect. Renford walked her to the transport truck. "Hell of a job, Lieutenant," he said. "Hell of an impact." She looked back at the base, the courtyard, the barracks, the fog beginning to lift over the mountains. "They just needed someone to believe they were worth more," she said. He nodded. "And you showed them that." When she stepped into the truck, the recruits stood in a line, silent, respectful, not because of fear, not because of force, because of what she represented: courage, strength, justice, integrity, and the power of rising after the hardest fall. The truck pulled away. The base didn't look the same without her, because she hadn't just trained them. She had changed them. True strength isn't found in the punch that lands, but in the person who rises after the blow, chooses integrity, and lifts others with them. Courage inspires courage. Discipline transforms character, and one act of justice can change an entire unit.